Welcome to the Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller podcast. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me, of course, is the rookie, Mr. Christachio.
Can I float an idea here? Because we talk about all the time, The Simpsons predicting the future. Okay. And in an episode of Barney Miller that we're about to talk about, not only does Dietrich more or less predict exactly how the Challenger is going to explode. He doesn't say that the Challenger is going to explode, but he does say, be careful for those heating tiles falling off of a space shuttle. I'd like to enter into the court documents that Barney Miller predicted the Challenger, and Arthur Dietrich may be to blame.
Yeah, I thought that the Challenger blew up because of a faulty O-ring.
Oh, no, you're right. It's not the Challenger. It was the one that exploded over Texas.
Right. Yes. I can't remember.
Discovery Columbia?
Columbia? Oh, boy.
I heard it was one of Baba Booey's teeth.
Yeah, it was so minor compared to the other one. Like, it just seemed to happen, and I didn't see the footage 1,000 times, probably because there wasn't footage.
There was that was the thing. I remember because it happened when I was in high school, and it was probably like hour or two from where we live, like, because it was in like the North Texas area. I remember when it happened, but yeah, we're bombarded with footage of it over and over again. But it sounded a little weird that he's like, oh, those heating tiles, if they ever come loose, it's like, holy shit, what the fuck is going on, Arthur Dietrich? He's an alien from the future.
You're the A. Dietrich?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The A. Dietrich.
On this episode, we are talking about 3 episodes of the original Barney Miller show. We are going all the way back to season 7 as we continue to trudge through season 7. We're talking about The Doll, which originally aired March 26th, 1981, just like 2 weeks before the space shuttle took off the very first time. Lady and the Bomb, which aired April 9th, 1981, and Riot, also very prescient episode, aired April 30th, 1981. Chris, what did you think of The Doll?
I thought it was interesting that in the precinct they were using kid gloves on this woman. It was very weird to me. Dee Croxton as Christine Lawson she's an interesting character because we don't always get these kinds of characters. We're going to talk about, paranoids with proof here pretty quick, especially a paranoid with actual proof in the next episode. But what's weird is in this episode, I thought she was going to say it was a dog at the beginning. Like, I forgot what the name of the episode was for like a moment, long enough, because it was, again, like, it was clear that the episode was withholding information because that was going to be the gag. And I actually like this episode a fair amount. I think that it's a pretty funny episode. I laughed out loud a couple times, actually. But I will say, for me, and Richard Haddam, if you're listening, and I know you are, this is the episode where I actually really like Levitt more than everybody else. And they treat him like shit in this episode, which is really hard to see because he's trying to be sincere, I feel like, most of the time. Though there is the one joke which they make a cute couple, which I'm pretty sure was fucking ad-libbed, because you can see how Lyndon, like, losing it. He's back to camera and he's corpsing really hard. So I don't know if that was an ad-lib line. James Gregory strikes me as the kind of guy who could pull that kind of ad-lib off, but I like this episode. What about you?
Yeah, I had fun with this. This was nice. This felt like a regular, good, solid episode of Barney Miller. We've got some pretty good A, B, and C stories going on here. I really like, I believe his name is Oliver Clark, who plays the gentleman who has bought a ticket for the space shuttle.
Right.
And it's so funny to hear them talking about commercial space travel, which kind of is happening, but kind of also
if you're rich enough.
Yes, if you're fucking loaded, you could go for a joyride in a spaceship. But, here we are, 2024. We've got what's it called? Like the Starlighter or whatever. Like,
oh, Starlink.
Yeah. No, not the satellites. The Boeing ship that's about to go up to the ISS. I think it just got delayed. And I love how Dietrich is just ripping on this NASA guy like crazy about all the delays and things, because you remember the Challenger and Space Shuttle era. I remember that era, and it was always like, oh, they're going to launch today. Nope, scrubbed. No. Oh, there was a bird flew into the window, scrubbed the mission. And the other day they're about to light this or send up this Boeing ship, which really does not fill me with confidence.
Oh boy, really? Wait, what happens in 0G if the door plug comes out? Are you telling me that people's seatbelts won't help them from being sucked out into space that time?
And I heard the story. Oh yeah, there was this like noise going on, so they couldn't figure out where it was coming from, so they scrubbed the mission. I'm like, all right, great. So I mean, same thing in 1981 as we're still doing here in 2024. And yeah, like you said, Dietrich talking about the heat tiles. I mean, that's hilarious. I mean, we were talking about heat tiles before the big disaster. Like there was always this thing about like, oh, how many heat shields did it lose, or what the heat tiles on this and how do they work and all that, because it wasn't aerodynamic. It wasn't like the shuttles came in nose first, they came in bottom first, so that they could deflect all that heat off the bottom. And I think that's hilarious that we're still talking about these things. I mean, yeah, well, like I said, we'll get there when it comes to Riot, but yeah, I like a lot of this. I think it's very solid. I like the doll story, and I like that, you know, we complained about this a lot in our first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons, maybe the lack of continuity between these episodes. This whole Blood on the Bed story, I mean, that's the continuity for so much of the show now.
Boy, isn't it? And that for me is the crazy thing, because in a lot of ways, well, I do agree with our dear friend Otto Bruno. I will say some of this season, I've appreciated it being different, which is, and look, here's the thing. And I mean, you know this, I know this because we spend a lot of time watching a lot of stuff. When you change things, people get upset and fans get upset, and fans want their displeasure to be heard about the thing that they don't like, or the way their thing that they love is being, you know, rebooted, remade, or in this show's case, just continuing on season to season. And again, having read Otto's book and up to the, you know, season 7 part of the book, and he talked about it when he was on our season, our show, what, 2, 3, 4 episodes ago now? How this is his least favorite season. And I can see why, because it is very different. I'm not saying this is my favorite season of the show, far from it, but it's had some interesting episodes that are very atypical of Barney Miller. We're going to be talking about one here pretty quick. This one is very typical. This is like, on the nose. You can't get any more typical than this episode. You've got a ridiculous A plot, and then the B and C plot are pretty straightforward. But for me, everything right now is all about Harris. That's where I'm interested. As far as me being an engaged viewer of the show, Harris's plot line has dominated this season, which I have not disliked. I've liked that a fair amount. Like, I like Harris. I think he's probably my favorite character on the show. And also, he's a Taurus. So there's that, which doesn't surprise me. Literally, when he goes, tell me what your sign is, I think it's in the next episode, he goes, I'm a Taurus. I was like, of course. Well, of course. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. As a Taurus myself, I get it. Like, I understand Harris now more than ever, because his character being written from that direction makes sense. But I love seeing him put through the paces in this season, because they're really taking him to task.
I didn't know you bought into astrology stuff. So what are all the signs of the other guys in the station? Can you predict that?
I don't know. That's the thing. I only know mine and like the relationship between mine and what my wife's is, which is Scorpio. So I know that Scorpios are like very like, I don't know. Scorpios are, I don't know. My wife just always, yeah, sort of. So no, I don't buy into it, quote unquote, but I have noticed things about myself that those things are true. So, and if you look at Harris, like the typical Taurus traits, he exhibits them like in full, especially the stuff with his dress, which, man, in this episode, hey, Luke, which is just, the fact that he finally says it back to him is amazing. That he gives him that. And then he's like, I don't like what you're wearing. Like, but then they do the thing where he's like, I like what you're wearing this time. He's like, oh shit, maybe I should go change. I was kind of surprised they didn't do like the gag of him like going to the bathroom to change, because Luger said he liked his outfit.
Luger is fucking amazing in this episode. He's so good. And like you said, like that potential ad lib towards the end there. I love when he's hanging out in the back when they bring in the doll box, the box with the doll parts in it. It's the ransom note. And he's in the back and he doesn't know what the hell's going on. And then once he figures it out, he just gives like a big and goes into Barney's office and is waiting for him in there. I love this tension too with Barney, this whole thing of him leaving all of his wealth to Barney when he passes off, and Barney kind of wanting all of that, but at the same time, it's just like, you know, it's kind of like me and my mom right now, where she's like, oh, when I die, I'm like, would you please enjoy yourself go on some trips, do whatever makes you happy. I'm not looking for any sort of inheritance. And like with Barney, you know, he has no blood ties to this man. I guess all of those Thanksgiving dinners are finally paying off, Chris.
Jesus, $235,000 in our money? That's what? 1981 funny money is probably like, oh my God, probably $750,000 now. Like, it's so much money. And the fact that Luger's just like, oh, it's like $235,000. And you could see Barney just go, what?
I love it.
But also on top of everything else, you're telling me, okay, this is a thing I've always had a hard time kind of squaring away with Luger. He lives in a dingy apartment and cooks on a hot plate. It's ridiculous. I love it, though, that he's just like this forever bachelor, kind of like, I guess, like a Walter Matthau from the Odd Couples type, like, you know, just a schmo of the highest order, you know, just like cooks on a hot plate, walks around in his underwear. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but in terms of the perception of him at home, I love Luger, though. He hasn't been around enough this season. Thankfully, in these 3 episodes, he shows up 2 of the 3 times.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah.
I love the interplay between all the guys. I love the opening here when they're talking about Dietrich came in late because he was out late. And, you know, he was out seeing a film. And then I love how Levitt's like, foreign film?
No, it was a Three Stooges marathon. And then Levitt going, no, I like the ones with Shemp. Dietrich's response is, I feel like that's how people think you and I and people who do this are. We're just like, we're going to be super dismissive. Like, I have nothing else to say to you. And it's just like, oh. But then the fact that Dietrich gets him with it, he's like, come on, Shemp. And he's like, you're never going to let me live that one down. It's like, yep, pretty much. Like, you're right, Shemp. He's kind of the Shemp of the, the 1-2, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about how, you know, like now, like this is the, you know, kind of like, you know, stormy weather we just talked about a few episodes ago, which was a great Levitt episode. Notice too that he's dressed very nice in this episode. He's wearing
all of them.
Suit. Yeah, and he's not wearing like like Herb Tarlick type jacket, not wearing a loud tie. He looks really sharp, and he's wearing dress clothes. He's not in uniform, which is so his goal. You know, I kind of like it. Feels almost like he's accepted.
I kind of, oh my God, Richard's probably just laughing to himself listening to this, but I kind of wish that would be the case at this point.
Yeah.
Because he's a welcome counterpoint, and I think he's a welcome counterpoint primarily to Dietrich. I think it's him and Dietrich playing off of one another. Because him and Barney, I mean, that's been well established, and I'm not saying that they haven't mined for all it's worth, but it kind of feels like they mined that part of their relationship over and over with the whole, like, why don't you bring me up here gag? And it's like, dude, like, I can't. What do you want from me? So I like that he gets to play off of other people, and the other people that he plays off of, I think, are better suited comedically for what he's bringing to the show, which is, you know, Dietrich just looking down on him, Harris being annoyed by him, and Wojo Howitz not having any idea what to do with it.
And Wojo barely in this episode, even though he's the one taking the statement by the woman who lost her doll. After that, he just kind of fades into the background a little bit. Like, yeah, it doesn't feel like this is definitely much more of a Harris and Levitt episode with really good Dietrich touches. But yeah, like Woj is just kind of in the back. I love when they recover the doll and the way that Barney's holding it like it's a real baby, and he's like bouncing it and stuff.
And the guy's like, can we get along with this now, please?
So good.
Yeah. And to your point about the blood on the badge stuff, I like that it's getting handled this season and they're not drawing it out. And I do like that because I didn't expect this to happen. I mean, we knew that the lawsuit thing happened because of a previous episode, but I didn't expect that they were going to like address it again and like have Barney and everybody going like checking in, and then Barney gets subpoenaed, which there's a payoff later we'll talk about, but that is fucking hilarious. How much... Because, I mean, again, we talked about this before. Was it after the Harris incident, or no, it was after they had to wear their like uniform
days. Yeah.
Yeah. And they are no longer, I wouldn't say that they're not friends, and I wouldn't say they're frenemies, because I think that first off, dumb fucking phrase. Secondly, they're not antagonistic towards each other, but they give each other a rather wide berth now. You can see that when they're around each other. Like, they're not always interacting with each other because they're not meant to be friends anymore. Because Harris has kind of put himself before everybody else, which, I mean, you can see by the fact that he gets really bent out of shape when he's like, oh, they're subpoenaing you, Barney?
Right.
It's like, well, we can destroy your character on the stand, so...
So flippant about it.
Yeah, but that's Harris, right? And that's, like, Ron Glass's character of Harris, for me, he's one of the best written and like African-American characters on TV at this time. He has to be, because he's representing in a way that doesn't feel like they're having to stretch him being representation. He's well dressed. He speaks really well. And he knows that too. It's not like everybody else is telling him. He knows. And that's the thing that's important for me, is that he knows that he can hang and bang with everybody.
And Ron Glass's comic timing, when he's talking with the lawyers and he's asking why it's so expensive, he's like, oh, phone consultations?
Bye.
Like this one? Bye. Yeah.
Bye. Yeah, no. That little bye is, yeah, his comedic timing. Yeah, he really has some of the best comedic timing on the show. And he also emotes really well too. I love Ron Glass. I mean, look, as someone who watched a lot of Firefly growing up, but I'm not a fan of that show, but I remember him in it and enjoying his character. This show really has been a treat to see a show with Ron Glass in it for 8 seasons at this point. But I mean, that's the case with everybody on the show is really great. It's just some people do kind of stand out a little bit more than others in certain seasons. Because 2 or 3 seasons ago, it was like Dietrich all the time, every time, baby. And now it's just he's faded into the back even.
Oh yeah, and like season 2, season 3, those are Fish's golden days.
Right.
And one more thing about the whole astronaut thing. I love that Oliver Clark is an optometrist, and that the NASA guy is like, oh, we've got a telescope that's supposed to go up. And I'm like, is that the Hubble telescope? Are they making references to the Hubble telescope all the way? Which kind of makes sense, because I want to say that launched in like 91, 92, something like that. And I just remember there was you probably remember this, a big scandal about the Hubble when it went up, because the telescope, it didn't work.
Right.
And it was just this another black eye for NASA. Like, NASA gets all the black eyes. They have the worst press,
They do.
But then they fix it. They managed to fix this thing, and now it's like one of our most valuable resources when it comes to space exploration and taking photos of these incredible pictures. But yeah, it was so funny, because I was like, oh, it was probably Oliver Clark working on that.
Right. And I assumed it was Hubble as well. Like they kind of alluded to it. And I guess it probably didn't have a name at that point. It was probably just like a long range telescope or something, I'm assuming. Like, then they gave it the name, but that's what I was assuming. I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of a nice little tie-in.
So I mentioned Fish.
Oh boy.
I think you had a very similar reaction to Lady and the Bomb that I had. I was so surprised. So this Lady and the Bomb starts off like a regular episode of Barney Miller. We start with Harris on the phone, and he's talking to his lawyers, and back to the blood on the badge stuff. We've got one of our most one of our most prolific characters on here. Well, actresses, Peggy Pope as Doris Carlisle. And Peggy Pope, we've talked about her many times before. I want to say she's been on here like 6 times or something.
A lot, to say the least.
And she's great. I love her voice. I mean, her voice is such her character, just that kind of like flighty type thing that she does. It's a little Candy Azara type voice that she's got. And we just start off here, like some banter going on with these guys. We've got Levitt reading the horoscope to Harris with talking about the court case and everything. Avoid court. I do love that he gets that in on him.
Avoid. Yeah. This, oh my God. Okay. So now that you've opened the box, can I say how unnecessary Fish is in this episode, and how I'm glad that he's gone from the show? Because
there we go. Spoilers. Fish is back.
Yeah.
Fish just walks into the precinct, and I'm like, what on God's green earth is happening right now? We talked way back in season 4. We're like, oh, he'll be back again. But it felt so far away, and it was so far away that I'd forgotten it came back. So when he shows up, I was like, what on? Oh my God.
Yeah. I literally said audibly, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Because he just walks in, walks to the bathroom, and everybody just, what the fuck? Like, what the, I mean, if they could say what the fuck, they would have, because that is the 100% appropriate response. Because what? I know why he's here. You know why he's here. He's here as a storytelling device. He is here as Deus Ex Fish, is what it feels like. I mean, it really is. Like, the way the episode ends, it's like, oh, okay, I see now where this is going. But this is probably going to upset some fans of the show. But Fish has not been needed on this show in a very long time. And this episode shows why. Because his style of comedy does not really work with anybody else's anymore. It seems out of touch and out of sorts with where the precinct has gone in the last 4 fucking years since he was on a single episode. 4 years, 3.5 by the show's count.
Well, and the strangest thing is he barely gives a reason for coming to the precinct.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I was in the neighborhood or I missed the old place. At first, I thought he was wandering back here like some senile old man, just like, oh, well, this is where I always work. No, you don't work here anymore. Like, I was expecting that. I was honestly expecting Fish to have lost his mind.
Well, and that's the thing. You just mentioned, they don't really give a good reason. The reason that they give is like it's literally like
canceled.
Yeah, like oh my god, brother, when they address how the characters from that show were treated, my god. Oh, Vincent Cassisi is now in jail, and the little girl who was like 10, 12 maybe now has a child.
Right.
Like, wow, this is the darkest timeline, Fish. What the fuck? Like, wasn't there was like a small black child on the show played by a famous child actor, Todd Bridges. Where's he? He's a ward of the state now. Like, I was put off by his appearance on this episode for a whole host of reasons. And it is ironic that him and Landisberg are talking about, technology and being kept alive. He outlived Landisberg.
Yeah.
Which is...
He outlived a lot of these guys.
Yeah, the only people he didn't outlive is what? Max Gale and Hal Linden.
Yeah.
Literally. I as crazy as it is, and as I wouldn't even say welcome, as much of a novelty as it is for Fish to show up in this episode, he did not add enough to justify being here at all. They could have given that to any other character in the precinct, including but not limited to fucking Barney could have talked about that, because on top of everything else, this episode is essentially one long extended erectile dysfunction joke. Hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is that like funny? Like, I guess in a time before Viagra, that was funny, right?
It's always funny. It's always funny when men can't perform.
I guess so. Like, I'm not saying like men's rights or anything, but just like, it feels like such a, what's the word? Low hanging fruit.
Yes.
Yeah,
no, that was it. That is totally what it is. And it's funny though, because, you're talking about Paranoids with Proof, and really Peggy Pope's character, she's and in the rate here, like, as far as her husband is working around dangerous materials. And when Mojo goes in there to see, it's just like, yeah, it's everywhere and it's all radioactive. It's like, and that's a problem that we, as far as I know, have never solved, which is we just continue to make radioactive waste and we continue to pollute our own planet with it and try to bury it as far as we possibly can, or dream about shooting it off into space. And, hey, maybe Elon can be our space garbage man.
Well, he's already garbage, so he's 2/3 of the way there, 1/3 of the way there. I do think it's funny because, I mean, aren't there like tons of caves in Tennessee and Kentucky where they just take all this shit and just dump it underground, or like put it in barrels underground? It is wild to me to think that there was a time in this country when we were storing radioactive waste in cities. Underneath buildings, possibly leaching into the groundwater. Like, yeah, again, not surprising. I mean, obviously I'm not, you and I are a very different age, but you were growing up around this time. So it's not like you were dialed into it. But the fact that this was like a thing is, again, shocking. I wouldn't say is the right word, but it's definitely just like, oh man, we have come a long ways since 1981. Well,
there was that whole incident in Louisville, Kentucky. I think it was July 3rd, 1984.
Oh, here we go.
Where that barrel cracked open and polluted the entire town, and was right next to a cemetery. And so all of those corpses came back. I mean, and that guy who's been in this in the series,
Don Calfa,
Don Calfa, he was there. He witnessed the whole thing.
Trioxin, I think. That was what it was called, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're
right. God. Boy, I hope somebody has no idea what we were talking about. They're just like, what did I miss? Louisville, Kentucky was razed to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't you remember when Louisville, Kentucky was
stronger?
Yeah. Wiped off the face of the earth. Yeah. It's, I mean, again, like I say, I'm surprised, but given that this country and so many other countries are motivated, at least policy making, solely by the almighty dollar, it's not surprising. And then and I do like that Wojciechowicz goes as far as to say, like, well, what if they don't want our fucking garbage, dumb? Like, what are you gonna do then? And it's like, oh, we'll figure it out. And it's like, dun dun dum dum. Okay.
It's so funny that, you know, Max Gale plays Woj as kind of adult a lot of times.
Right.
Just a little slower, you know, a little thick-headed sometimes, but he is the social champion, you know, like I know this has gotten a bad rap over but he is actual social justice warrior. Like the way he takes on the government around all of these issues, and it's just like, what are you doing? You know, and I love it. I love that. And that's Max Scale. Like Max Scale is an actual like social justice person, but he has to like mask it behind Wojciechowicz in this, which is great.
Yeah, I was about to say, isn't all of this like social justice stuff is Max Scale the person? Which, look, I respect immensely, especially in an industry like Hollywood, where being that person willing to stand by your guns and give a shit about stuff can get you fired from things and let go from projects and even blacklisted. And you know, yeah, it's weird because it is kind of a cognitive dissonance in the character. It doesn't, I'm not saying it, and you're not saying this either, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but there needs to be a bridge to that, and the show has never given us one. I guess the closest the show's ever gotten is him being a Vietnam vet.
Yeah.
Or an ex-Marine, I guess.
And talking about Agent Orange. Right. I mean, so many of these things are pretty close to him, especially because he was a tool of the government for so many years when he was in the Marines.
Right.
And now it's like, you know, he has had the scales have fallen from his eyes, where he's just like, you know, when Dietrich's talking about protesting against the war, and he's just like, well, I was in the war. And it's like, well, it was kind of an unjust war. And I think it really took a lot for him to actually accept that and to accept Dietrich's opinion.
Yeah. And to your point, like Wojo has really been the voice of, I wouldn't say the voice of the voiceless, but kind of, he's been beating the drum. I mean, other than sex workers, which he kind of has come around on, though, it would seem.
And it seems like he definitely pays a lot for them now.
Frequents them a lot, apparently. Hopefully he's wearing a Jimmy hat.
That's why you can't date my daughter.
Right, because you have sex with so many prostitutes. Like, right. Okay, Barney, are we making moral judgment calls here all of a sudden? God. Yeah, thankfully there's none of that in this episode. None of the kind of the preachiness, but I do like that Wojciechowicz stands up for what he believes in and calls out the government dickhead and tells the government dickhead, like, this isn't okay. James Murtaugh, Ron Giles, government dickhead. It's great. Or I guess he's not the government dickhead. He's the hospital dickhead. But he's working, he's essentially an extension of the government, at least in this episode's approximation. So,
well, I'm surprised it wasn't David Clemens, because he loves to show up as the government stooge, or as like someone that thinks that they're like a love guru or Jesus or somebody. I love that he can play either of those with no worries at all.
Do you like the two old men in the cell playing chess, though?
I'm trying to remember how their story resolves, because I remember the resolution of Peggy Pope and her husband coming in and being slightly embarrassed by this stuff, the hospital admin guy coming in. The last thing I remember from the chess players was when the one guy kind of freaks out the other guy and says, oh, that woman out there has a bomb. She could blow us all up. We don't have 10 minutes. And the guy takes his hand off the piece, indicating that he's done with his move. And the guy's like, oh, and then jumps right in. I don't remember what else happens with that.
Me either.
It really made an impression.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's. I think the gag is funny, but I don't think that they resolve it in a satisfying way, because the plot line that they have here is pretty high stakes. Like, this woman has a pressure cooker bomb in the precinct, and they don't know if it's going to go off. I just sped through the end of this episode. There is no resolution. That's their last line. Oh my God. That's what I thought. Like, I was like, there isn't one, right? No, I didn't want to be wrong, because that's the worst thing to be on a podcast, is to be wrong so people can jump all over you. But that was my assumption, because all I remember is, oh, got your piece, and that's it. Like, they were in there forever. Yeah, because Fish gets the bomb back. You know, Fish is always saving us from bombs, it feels like. Oh, yeah. I'm surprised he didn't throw it into the safe. Surprised he didn't take it home and give it to Bernice. Exactly. God. Yeah,
now I have some takeout for Bernice.
Yeah, like, oh God, talk about an old, tired, trite gag being run around the course one more time. Like, take this puppy out back and just put it down because it's not funny. Like,
no.
Take my wife, please. No, take my wife. Like, Henny Youngman did it best. Abe Vigoda, you're a poor facsimile of that. And again, like that, I'm not saying we don't need a curmudgeon in the precinct, far from it, but where the show has gone since he left is so different from where it was when he was here that he doesn't feel like a welcome cameo. He feels like a kind of a vestigial tail, still just kind of hanging on a little bit. It's like, just snip that thing off and be done with it. Like, there's no need.
Yeah, so we got him taking the bomb. We got the government guy, the hospital guy, Wojo kind of laying into him. He goes away, and the husband goes away. And then, yeah, that's it. We have a little denouement with Fish leaving the precinct, and that's it. And another Bernice joke is how he ends that.
And that's the last time he's on the show.
Yeah. Doesn't even come back for Landmark at the end.
Which, is that the most surprising part of this? Because it is for me.
It is, yeah. I would think he would come by one last time. But I wonder how, I know that Otto Bruno has written about this, the relationship between Abe Vigoda and Danny Arnold, and probably even Noam Pitlick. Not that good, I imagine.
No. And that's, whose fault is that? Abe Vigoda's fault.
Yeah.
Period. The end. Like, look, it's clear to me that everybody else could hang and bang with Noam Pitlick and Danny Arnold because everybody else has stayed on the show and been upgraded from guests to full-time cast members, even in Steve Landisberg's case. And here's Abe Vigoda going and doing his own failed show and then cracking wise about it in this show. Like, hey, dude, guess what? Your show failed and you left this show. Bye. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying I don't like Abe Vigoda. It's just his character of Fish at this point, not a fan because it's just unwelcome.
Well, it is funny that Dietrich does a Remember Me.
Right.
Which is like, do you remember him in that original, like, side pilot? Well, there's the priest, but it was like he was in that potential spin-off episode with Fish when it was Bernice and their daughter.
Oh, that's right.
And it was like, oh, I want to learn from you. I want to learn from the best. And it was like, wow, this is setting up quite a relationship that never went anywhere.
Literally never went anywhere.
No.
And then when they have it here, it's like, who cares? Like, it's played for a gag, which is fine. I mean, that's all it needed to be. But yeah, what a weird addition to this season to have Fish show up just out of the blue.
And then we have to talk about Riot, which...
Do we have to?
It's so odd. And now I understand, like, obviously we're looking at this from 2024 lens, where there's a lot of protests happening right now on college campuses. There's a war happening or in Israel and Palestine.
And don't forget Ukraine.
Yes. And this is apparently modeled on an incident that took place back in 1978 when there was a Orthodox Jew that was killed over in Brooklyn. So there's that. And of course, Jewish people have been persecuted for centuries. So there's a lot of stuff that this is built on. But to look back at this episode from where we sit right now is just a little bizarre for me, because this pretty much revolves around a riot that happens because a Hasidic Jew has been attacked on the Sabbath, and one of their representatives comes to the precinct and is just expressing he doesn't have anything other than just a whole bunch of grief to lay at their feet and say, this happened, where were you guys? And I didn't necessarily appreciate Wojo just jumping in there going, we don't work on Friday nights or something. I was like, whoa. Yeah, like, gotta be a little nicer to this guy. But this turns into a really bad situation very quickly. And we have Luger to thank for a lot of it.
Well, you're telling me that Hasidic Jews probably don't enjoy having their faces being called into question by a non-believer, by a Gentile, and being told to shave?
Yes, go home and take a shave.
Go home and take a shave.
Take a shave.
Good God, Luger.
No wonder you didn't want to go down there with me, Barn.
Yeah, right? Like, yeah. Fuck, don't want to get lumped in with Luger.
Well, he was. He was trying to get. He was like, "No, I'll go. I'll
go."
Yeah. Like, you stay here. You and your fucking megaphone stay here. Yeah. I don't need you trying to make a bad thing worse, which he does. This episode is bizarre. When that material comes flying through the front window, and that Hasidic Jew sticks his head through the window, it looked like he was a space alien. Like, I know, like. And I'm not talking about the man's looks, his hair, his beard, his clothes, any of that stuff. Just the way he looks in, it's just this strange look on his face, just almost like, because he has no expression. It's not like he's coming in like, oh, I did that, or I'm proud of my work, or like, what's in this room? He just like kind of leans in and sticks his head, and I'm just like, what is this guy's deal? This is bizarre.
Yeah. This episode's a mess. The idea at the center of it, I think it's probably what Otto's talking about when we're talking about seasons of this show that don't work well. This might be one of those specific episodes because it is such a tonally inconsistent episode. And on top of that, not only is it tonally consistent, but the way it handles some of the stuff, I'm not saying it's problematic. I frankly fucking hate that word. I would say it's more just tone deaf, but it's tone deaf in 1981. Like, the time of being tone deaf was a very long time for entertainment. I mean, up until like the late 90s, there was very little openly gay characters on things that weren't being made fun of. This show included, frankly. So, if you're Jewish, if you're gay, if you're Black, if you're Asian, if you're anything, representation is hard to come by in media. And then when you have it be this, not great. Really bizarre. Yeah, to your point, everything about this episode it smacks of another show. It smacks of a more serious show where people are actually invading the precinct. Like, what the fuck? Right. When did this all of a sudden become Assault on Precinct 13? Like, what the fuck is this? It's bizarre, and it, on top of everything else, it uses the crutchiest of crutches known to man in terms of storytelling, which is cut away and then cut back and everything's fucked up.
Right.
It's like, oh, it happened off screen. It's like, this is the one time that we've ever gotten to see something like this, and it's going to happen off screen? Really, show? They make it almost feel like this is a commonplace thing. It's like, this has never happened before. We've never had anybody storm the precinct like this.
Yeah. It's kind of upsetting.
Honestly. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
And especially, and plus, yes, you're absolutely right. The oddity of cutting out, go to commercial, come back, and then they're telling stories about how Levitt was handcuffed to the jail cell.
Hilarious.
Yeah, Dietrich comes in and calls him Houdini, and I'm just like, this is strange. I mean, yeah, this feels like it should have been on a very special episode, and it's not. And I think they should have gone either darker or way lighter. And personally, I would have actually preferred darker, I think.
Well, and given that the riot happens because a guy gets beaten up, not killed. Like, if the original inciting incident was someone dying, then yeah, I would totally understand why this is the response, frankly. But that's not what happens here. This guy got shit beat out of him. I mean, you're telling me that there's a bigger response to this guy getting the shit beat out of him than an actual store owner being gunned down and shot in the fucking head? Really? Really, show? Okay.
Yeah. Had they said like, oh, we just got news from the hospital and this guy passed away.
Right. To amp that up.
Exactly.
Nope. And then on top of everything else, we have fucking preppers in this episode. It's like, do we need to have us constantly reminded of the real times we live in now by Barney Miller a week and a couple days after, the day I was born in 81, April 22nd. This is April 30th. We're essentially what, like 60 years removed from this? And it's like, we're still talking about this shit today.
Yeah. And what's so strange for me is that, we talk about paranoids of proof. We just talked about that in the last episode. And then here we have these guys. Preppers are the definition of paranoia. That's their whole existence. And then that this riot breaks out and that it's Hasidic Jews. And they're like, oh, we didn't expect it to be the Jews. I'm like, that's awful. That is just awful. And again,
at least they didn't say who they expected it to be.
Right, exactly. Well, when they're telling that story about how the husband pretends to be a minority and attack his wife, and I'm just like, oh man,
these motherfuckers are into race play.
Oh yeah, they are. and they made the homeless guy watch.
Yeah.
The Howard Platt as the husband of the preppers, he is freaking amazing. Like, go on to his IMDb at some point and look at just the way his look changes throughout these things. For me, he is primarily Officer Hoppy Hopkins, who is of the two cops on Sanford and Son. There's one who's a brother and one who has absolutely no soul. He is like the whitest white man of all times. He's the guy who says, right off. And then the black guy has to say on, like,
right.
That's his character. And he looks so different there. He was on a really good episode of MASH. He looked so different there. When he first showed up, I thought he was Jerry from the Bob Newhart show. And then I was even more confused because there was a one of the stills on his IMDb is of the Bob Newhart show. He was on there, but he is not Jerry. He's very much not. I believe it's Larry Gelman or is it Peter? No, Peter Boners is Jerry. So yeah, it's he's amazing. He's terrific. I wish he was given a lot more to do. This role is very one note, and his wife is very one note as well.
Yeah, and I actually like the guy who comes in more, the guy who owns the store, because he's the real piece of shit. Like,
well, they told me they had a license. Driver's license counts, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, right.
We're bending the law a little bit. It's like you sold him a gun. Like, bending the law, that's your definition. Jeez, I'd like to see what you think breaking the law is. They allude to using a grenade launcher, so that's probably what breaking of the law is in their mind. Yeah. I like where Barney says, if society's going out, then I'm going out with it. Because the last thing I want to do is be around with people like you. And it's just like, mic drop. But then the guy gets him back pretty good. It's like, well, it'll be more for us then. It's like, also technically true. This is a very tonally inconsistent episode. And this is on a very special episode because this episode's not funny. Like, it's not funny the way anything else has been in this show. It's just maybe 40 years from now when hopefully, if you're listening into the future, we're not dealing with these kind of conflicts anymore. And by dealing with, I mean hearing about it and being subjected to it. Because again, we live in a pretty safe part of the world where we're not having to worry about it. I wonder if these things weren't going on now, how we would feel about this episode. Because that's the other question, right? Like, imagine if we'd watched this episode 2 years ago. You've been like, we wouldn't have batted an eye. Because it's just, again,
talked a little bit about some incursions and things, but yeah, and like I've known that Netanyahu is not very nice by any means. But yeah, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect, the people that were genocided to genocide.
It's not genocide. It's just, we're just making sure we're safe by making sure there's no one left. I mean, what do you do when there are other factions? You destroy all the other factions and then you're the only one left. That's what Fallout taught me. So, and that's a TV show made by Amazon Prime. So they've got their finger on the pulse or on the button, however you want to look at it. I don't want to drag this episode any more than we already have, but this might be one of the worst episodes of the show in terms of execution and in terms of like the stories being both pretty off-putting, because there's a lot of parts and there's a lot of elements of each story beat or storyline that are really like tone deaf and weird and played for laughs. And it's, again, like woke, problematic, whatever the fuck you want to call it. We've just come a long ways since 1981, which is a good thing. Like, don't have to cancel this show, nothing like that. We know that times have changed. This show was made in a time and place where you could get away with this kind of storyline on a, over-the-air TV, which is the craziest part, really.
I feel like they really, this is going to sound weird because one of the things that Hasidic Jews like is to be othered and to be separated, but they feel very othered on this episode. They feel like, talking about that guy sticking his head in the door, it feels like they're being treated like aliens. One of the things that does that is that other than the one rabbi, nobody is allowed to speak. Like, they bring in this one guy, Harris brings in, get in here, Rasputin, okay, and pushes him in, and the guy just is there looking at Barney, looking at Harris, looking down, fixing his coat. He doesn't get a line. And I'm like, well, that's probably because they aren't going to pay all of these extras and they don't have SAG cards. This is fucked up, man, to just not have any of them speak, just have the one Jew that's allowed to talk other than Barney.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't it weird that they never even bring that up?
Yeah. Also, yeah.
Like, hey, I am, while I am not Hasidic, I am Jewish. Like,
right.
You know.
Yeah. And I know like people are very different. I'm sure that there are Hasidic people that are just like, yeah, that's cool. You know, there's different types of Jews. No problem. There are probably other Hasidic Jews and other, you know, Reform, etc., that are probably like, no, we are the real ones. Those are the fakes. You know, they're basically less than dirt because they pretend to be Jewish and we are the real Jewish people.
Yeah, man. I hope we don't see another one of these episodes in the show, because it's a drag. These episodes are a drag because it's taking our characters and putting them on a path that is just not funny, and it doesn't suit or serve them as characters at all.
Well, we might. I mean, because the next 3 episodes that we're going to talk about, one is called Snuff, the other one is called Wojo's Rape, and the third one is called The Dog Killer. So,
oh my God,
it's really going to get rough for the end of season 7.
The Dog Killer. Speaking of I was saying, speaking of topical issues, Jesus Christ. Yeah, wouldn't that be weird? All of a sudden, it's like, what? This show is predicting the future.
Right. We found it. We
knew it. Now we have proof. Barney Miller was doing it. Yeah, you know, for
proof.
Right? For as strong as the first 2 episodes are, this 3rd episode is definitely the lesser of the 3 by a substantial margin.
Yeah, I'm hoping, because really I would consider that fish one to be, you know, sliding, but we like rounded 3rd or sliding into home. And I hope these last 3 episodes aren't just, you know, us eating a plate of dirt. In the next 3 episodes, we're going to talk about the vests. So I'm sure there's some bulletproof vests coming out, the Rainmaker, and Liquidation, as we wrap up season 7 of Barney Miller, the show. And we don't wrap up, well, I guess we wrap up our season here on The Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller. And if all goes right, we will be joined by the aforementioned Otto Bruno as we talk about these last few episodes of this one before we plunge into season 8. Though, Chris, we probably should take a little break and actually watch some fish episodes. I don't want to watch them.
We're going to finally do this. Do people want this? I don't know. Do we want it? You're fucking right. We do.
Man, we're going to just internet polls or something, or just fucking do it anyway?
I think we should just do it anyways, because I think we owe it to this show to see how bad this show could have gotten should Abe Vigoda had stuck around for another couple seasons.
And we maybe like split up the season and just like 1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2, 1, 3, 5, 7 or something like that. Watch all those episodes and just come back and do fish in one episode and never talk of this again. And I know like the second season, someone was kind enough to send us information that we can get that off of like Canadian television or a Canadian streaming site. I don't know if I even want to go there. I was so raring to go when we first started, and now I don't want to go in Fishtown.
Yeah, I'm with you, especially after this episode. Like I think we probably owe it to our listeners to talk about a little fish, maybe not the whole damn thing, but a couple episodes. We'll figure out what those episodes are. But yeah, I've got to say we need to do the thing the right way, which is we got to pay service to a bad show that spun off from a good show, which is so weird, right? Like it's like how Forgetting Sarah Marshall has a sequel, like a sort of sequel. It's like, did anybody remember that Get Me to the Greek or Get Him to the Greek is a fucking sequel? It's like, does anyone remember that Fish was a spinoff of Barney Miller? Clearly not, because nobody watched it. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to it, but I'm curious the depth at which the show gets to in terms of quality.
All right. At least we've got a little time to get there.
One episode.
Yeah. Well, until then, Chris, what are you up to these days, sir?
Everything that I'm up to is primarily of the audio variety, though I am doing a video thing now once a week, but you can find almost everything over at weirdingwaymedia.com other than the aforementioned video thing, which can be found on YouTube. Just search Film Foundations and we'll be the only thing on there. But yeah, Weirding Way Media and Film Foundations on YouTube. What about you, Mike?
Also over at weirdingwaymedia.com, where you can get all the stuff that I work on as well, including the projection booth. We talk about Columbo once a month on The Shabby Detective. I think fans of Barney Miller, probably also fans of Columbo, feels like it would be a natural match. I don't know why.
Lots of cops. Curmudgeon-y cops, though. Curmudgeon-y cops with Columbo are a little different than curmudgeon-y cops on Barney Miller.
Well, until we come back, thank you everybody for listening, and thank you to John Walker for our theme music. And please go over to wherever you got this podcast, rate and review it. It would help us out as we plow into season 7, after we plow into season 8, as we finish up season 7 and take a dive into Fishtown.